A young woman teacher is oblivious to her obvious liberal tendencies, explains to her class of small children she's an atheist. She asks her class if they are atheists too. Not really knowing what atheism is, but wanting to be like their teacher, their hands just shut up. There is, however, one exception. A girl named Lucy has not gone along with the crowd. The teacher asked her why she has decided to be different. The little girl said, because I'm not an atheist. Then asked the teacher, what are you? I'm a Christian. The teacher is a little perturbed now, but her face slightly red. She asked Lucy, why is she a Christian? Well, I was brought up knowing and loving Jesus. My mom is a Christian, my dad is a Christian, and I am a Christian. Teacher is now angry. That's no reason. What if your mom was a moron and your dad was a moron? What would you be then? A pause and a smile, then Lucy says, I'd be an atheist. Isaiah chapter 48, verse 10. Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. And before I go too far, I just want to remind you a couple of things from last week. Number one, God loves you. And He knows your name. Never forget that. Some time ago, a few ladies met in a certain city to read the Bible and make that the subject of conversation. While reading the 3rd chapter of Malachi, they came upon a remarkable expression in the 3rd verse, and it goes like this, and he shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. One lady's opinion was that it was intended to convey the view of the sanctifying influence of the grace of God. Then she proposed to visit a silversmith and report to them what he had said on the subject. She went accordingly and, without telling the object of her errand, begged to know the process of refining silver, which he fully described to her. But, sir, she said, you sit while the work of refining is going on. Oh, yes, ma'am, replied the silversmith. I must sit with my eyes steadfastly fixed on the furnace. For if the time necessary for refining is exceeded in the slightest, the silver will be injured. The lady at once saw the beauty and comfort of the expression, he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Christ sees it needful to put his children into the furnace. God allows us to go through trials so that we may grow and become, as the saying goes, smooth and shiny. Do you like being smooth and shiny? His goal is for us to become a reflection of Him, so that others can see Christ in us. So as the illustration goes of silver, as you and I are being refined, people should be able to see a reflection of Christ in us. Trials are going to come. Hard times will be there. When silver is being purified, the heat gets turned up. And as that happens, it exposes the impurities. In like manner, we may not like to hear this, but when you go through trials, it exposes us. It exposes our weaknesses. It exposes the impurities in our life. It exposes those weak spots that we have. And when that's exposed, God can work on those areas in our life. Moses had this kind of an experience. God chose Moses for a very special job. And most everybody here has heard the story of Moses. God wanted Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And at one point, Moses thought he would take things into his own hands. He saw an Egyptian abusing one of the Israelite slaves. So Moses killed the Egyptian. And then he tried to cover it up. But word got out that what Moses had done, and Moses had to flee for his life. And as a result, Moses wound up in the desert for 40 years, taking care of sheep. Moses had a lot to learn because of that mistake. And one lesson I'm sure of is, don't take things into your own hands. You've got to leave things in God's hands. God will tell us when the time is right for what He wants to do, wants us to do. So often we want to jump ahead of God. We want to take things into our own hands, right? Just a couple of you do. The rest of you are pretty good. So often we just want to get ahead of God. God says, I want you to do this, and you just want to jump and run right now. And that's a good thing. But God says, no, now's not the time. So Moses is in the desert tending sheep. His life, because of his disobedience earlier, became a very monotonous life. A very routine life. Going out every day into the hot sun, taking care of the sheep. In the cold of the winter, he's taking care of the sheep. But God, really, I can handle the big job. God, really, that job that you wanted me to do in the beginning, it's okay, I can do that. God, I'm better than this. I can do more than just tending sheep. I can do this. But Moses, you're going to learn a lot of taking care of these sheep. Moses, you're going to learn patience. And yes, how about waiting on God? And besides just waiting on God, how about learning God's timing in your life? Moses learned a lot in the desert. And he was able to use that when it was God's time for him to lead the children of Israel out of captivity, out of Egypt, and lead them towards the promised land. You see, we have a lot to learn in life, don't we? God was refining Moses to get him ready for the big job. The time was coming when the patience that he learned in the deserts, the patience he learned while he was tending sheep, would be put to use. When knowing God's timing would be very useful. He learned how to do that. When God wants to use somebody for a special job, He always prepares them for that job. He puts them to the test. He puts us to the test. And He refines them through the trials that we face. When I read Isaiah 48 verse 10, and it said, furnace of affliction. One story in the Bible came to mind: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Also known as the three Hebrew boys. And I want you to keep this in mind as I tell you part of the story. It's believed that those boys were in their 20s, early 20s, when this story took place. These three young men were actually Israelite slaves in the land of Egypt during the reign, in Babylon, during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar had ordered a gold statue to be built that was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide of himself. Now, keep in mind, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had favor with King Nebuchadnezzar. The king had placed these three young men in charge of the whole province of Babylon. Now, mind you, he placed slaves over the province of Babylon, one of his provinces. That's how much confidence that King Nebuchadnezzar had in those three young men. The king had sent word to have all the administrators, all the governors, all the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province. Anybody that was anybody was told to come to the dedication of this image. Anyone of stature had to come. All the leaders of the land were to come, so this was a personal thing for King Nebuchadnezzar. They all gathered, and they're all standing around the statue. And then it was announced. He didn't tell them anything more when he called them, when he summoned them to this dedication. What he was going to require them to do. He just said, I want everybody to come. And then it was announced, when you hear the music begin to play, you will fall down and worship this image. And whoever does not do this will be thrown immediately into the burning furnace. So when the music played, everyone bowed down except. Here's three guys, young men, had everything going for them in life. In our thoughts and the thoughts of everybody that was gathered there, what was going to stand before those three guys, because they didn't bow down, was that furnace. And I can only imagine what people were thinking then and said, look, oh God, why didn't they bow down? They're going to be killed. God's favor was on their lives. They stood to lose all the status that they'd gained. They stood to lose all the stature that they had in the land. And wouldn't you know it, some Chaldeans came to the king and said, oh king, there's some Jews here that didn't bow down. It's the three guys that you had put in charge of Babylon. And he said, bring them to me. And the three were brought before the king, and King Nebuchadnezzar says, hey guys, what's going on here? I heard you guys didn't bow down. What are you trying to do? You trying to embarrass me? You know I like you. Are you trying to embarrass me? But you know I can't go back on the proclamation that I've made. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you another chance. So let's go through this again. I'm going to tell everybody that when the music plays, that everybody's going to bow down again. And come on, guys, just go with me here. You know, you've got a picture of how the story's going here. So here's what King Nebuchadnezzar said. I'm going to give you one more chance. Bow down next time and everything will be okay. I'll be happy. So here we are, going through life, doing everything right. You're facing a major trial in your life, and then the pressure gets turned up. I know the king wants to say, guys, you know you're going to die. And then the boy said this. And I was so pleased when they showed honor to King Nebuchadnezzar when they said, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. We don't need to defend ourselves. The God we worship can save us from you and your flaming furnace. But if he doesn't, we still don't worship your God. And the golden stature that you have set up. Here's three boys that knew what God could do. Many of you in life have seen God work all kinds of miracles in your life. You have been through the furnace, you have been through trials, and you've seen what God can do. And here I think of the boys, the miracles that they had already seen in their lives. They weren't going to back down because they knew what God could do. And even if God chose not to save them here, they would still take a stand for God. They knew whatever happened would be in God's plan. How many of us here this morning, if things aren't going quite right, do we really know? It doesn't matter what happens, we're still going to take a stand. Sometimes, just like the three Hebrew boys, everything's going right for us. It seems like we've done everything right, and we know nothing's going to be bad come our way. Obviously, the king wasn't happy with their response, though. In fact, the literal translation would read, his face was twisted with anger. He was mad. I always used to call him King Neb. King Neb was mad. And you know, Satan hates it when you stand strong. And when you resist what he throws at us. I was thinking of Jesse at this point in time. Be bold. Be strong. For the Lord thy God is with thee. Be bold. Be strong. Amen. So the king ordered the furnace to be turned up 7 times.
Cooking a lot of pizzas.
Well, he's not cooking. So.
Oh, yeah.
Just so we're on the same page here. The furnace would have killed anyone on the first setting. But it was turned up. So why would he do that? Number one, he didn't like being embarrassed. It's one of my thoughts. And number two, he lost his cool. And keep this in mind, if you really want to get the enemy stirred up in the face of opposition, keep a song in your heart. Keep a smile on your face. Amen. Keep God's joy. Keep God's peace in your heart. And number 3, he did it to put more pressure on those 3 Hebrew boys. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood strong in their faith. They knew what God could do, and no amount of added pressure could change their mind. Too many times when God speaks to our hearts about doing something, when opposition comes, when the going gets tough, we will say something like, well, I guess that just wasn't God's plan for me. You know what? But no. Again, be bold. Be strong, for the Lord your God is with you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had done all the right things in their life. They'd honored God. They were promoted to leadership. They refused to worship idols. They stood firm in their faith. And they are now at a point where they are totally dependent on God. If God didn't intervene, it was over for them. If God did not do it, it simply would not get done. Have you ever been there? Sure you have. Some of you have been there. You're at a point in your life, if God didn't intervene, the situation would never change. So imagine with me for a moment. 3 Hebrew boys walking up the ramp towards the furnace. The fire was so hot that it killed at least one of the soldiers that was going up the ramp with them. And I can only imagine what was going through their minds. God, you know, this would be a good time to show up. God, it's getting a little hot in here. You know, and that wasn't a stutter on purpose, but you know, God, don't let me down. You ever said that to God?
Yeah.
In your conversation, God, I have gone through certain things. I'm going, and I've prayed for somebody. I'm praying in faith that God will take care of a situation in somebody's life. And I'm going, God, don't let me down here. And I can picture the 3 Hebrew boys saying, God, you can't let us down here. As they're walking up the ramp. God, you know I love you, right? Yes, and really, God, I have a lot of faith. Nebuchadnezzar's men had to throw them into the furnace because it was too hot to just get close enough to push them in.
Well, I'm better than that.
And then the 3 realized, wow, I'm not dead.
I'm not smoking.
I'm not dead. And the ropes that they were tied with are burned off. And they didn't get burned themselves. And yes, you know the rest of the story. King Nebuchadnezzar was amazed. He saw 4 men walking around inside that fiery furnace. And the 4th, we only threw 3 in. But the 4th is likened to one of the gods. And that's how he put it. Like a son of the gods. But remember, it wasn't just the king that was there. I want you to notice something here. The rulers of the whole land were there, seeing what was going on. They saw these young men stand firm in their faith, stand firm in their belief with God. And they also saw these 3 men and the 4th walking around in the fiery furnace. All the important people were there. And I was thinking about all this. God, don't you think this was a little odd? Don't you think this was a little strange for you to show up, have a church meeting inside of a furnace? Don't you think you should have met with these men on the ramp going up to the furnace? Don't you think it would have been better if you had met with them before? You know, when the time of testing comes, and you find yourself surrounded by a furnace, or maybe I should say, in a furnace, realize this, many times, God will use such a place like this to reveal himself to you in a very real way. And also realize God may use this time in the furnace to burn those ropes off of you, to break the bonds that are holding you back. They're keeping you bound with different things in your life that you need to be set free from. We have things in our lives that need to get burned off of us, that we need to be cleaned up in. And also that God will take you to much greater heights in your walk with him. I want to go higher with him. I want to go higher in my walk with God. I don't want to stay the norm. I don't want to be in the norm. I want to see the extraordinary going on, gang. Sometimes you can do all the right things in life and still face opposition. Sometimes God will deliver you from it, but other times he delivers you in it. While you're going through it, he will deliver you in it. God uses the very things that the enemy meant to destroy you for your own good. God did not abandon the 3 Hebrew boys. He didn't leave them stranded in the fire or in the worst of their times. He was right there with them. And this is the last comment here that I want to make, is they were set free in the fire. You and I go through things in life. Some of you are in the middle of some very serious things in your life right now. Right now. Let God have control of what he's doing in your life. And I'm going to be very blunt here. Some of you might be struggling with drug addictions. Some of you might have a problem with alcohol, smoking. You're going, Craig, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to name things like that. But I'm going to say it. Some of you have problems with other things in your life. Long list I could go down. God wants to deliver you while you're in the midst of what you're going through. Like I said, he didn't leave the 3 Hebrew children stranded in the fire. They saw 4. They saw 4. And their bonds, the things that were used to tie them up, were burned up. You and I can be released from whatever is holding you back in your life. For whatever you are going through in your life, that you're struggling with in your life, I want you to understand this. God is there with you. He will go through it. He will go through the fire with you. Use one comment sometime before, when you're going through hell, don't stop. Keep going. Don't stop. It's not your resting place. something this morning. I'm not going to ask for any hands to be raised right now, but if you want God to deliver you in some of those trials that you're going through, we're going to pray. We're going to pray. And after the service is over, if you want to come forward, I'd love to be praying with you. This past